Welcome to Housing Options for Aging in Place Accessory Dwelling Units, presented by AARP North Carolina and the R.L. Mace Universal Design Institute. My name is Pax Baptiste, and I'm the Associate State Director for Outreach and Advocacy of the Triangle Region for AARP North Carolina. The platform we're using today is Zoom Webinar. You'll be able to see and hear all of today's speakers, and although you won't be able to appear on camera, we encourage you to utilize the Q&A function to type in questions you have for our speakers. AARP North Carolina has a long history of supporting housing options for older adults in our communities. We are so excited to be partnering with Cole Peterson and Accessory Dwelling Strategies and other key organizations and individuals in Durham city and county governments, the for and not-for-profit housing sectors, and county residents of all ages. Today, you will hear from AARP's Vice President of Family, Home, and Community, Rodney Harrell, co-leader of Durham's Master Aging Plan, Shelia Howard-Martinez, the City of Durham's Planning Supervisor, Scott Whiteman, and the Executive Director of the Universal Design Institute, Richard Duncan. Richard will also walk us through a video tour of real-life ADUs in our community, and you will have the opportunity to have your questions answered live by our experts. Thank you again for being here, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter, Rodney Harrell.
Hello, and thank you for the introduction. I appreciate you, Pax, for hosting, and I appreciate all of you for joining to have a discussion on this important topic. I'd like to really, talk to you about, in a broad sense, of why housing issues are important for AARP and for the country, and in particular, why we should be thinking about accessory dwelling units as one of those strategies that are important for us to consider. As Pax noted, I'm AARP's Vice President of Family and Community, leading a group in our Public Policy Institute that's really focused on looking at solutions. And so accessory dwelling units has been a solution for a while that we've been looking at. AARP introduced a Model Act for ADUs back in 2000 with the American Planning Association. And we've really ramped up our efforts in recent years as it's a solution that we think can really have some more benefit for our livable communities work and for many of the issues that challenge us today. And Pax, I think we're in the presenter mode. Is there a way that we can turn off that mode for folks? Unclick presenter view on the right there. I think we'll, on the, there we go. So people can see all of this better. And so we can go to that second slide for folks. And so this is a slide I like to use to talk about most of my presentations because it shows something important here. On the left-hand slide is a graphic from the Census Bureau that shows something fundamental is happening in 2034. And that's that older adults are going to outnumber children for the first time in history. That means people over 65, there'll be more of them in our communities all across the country, more people over 65 than under 18. And I like to start off with this because it's a fundamental change. What it means is that we are going to have to rethink the way we build our homes, our communities, our transportation systems, our products, our services, everything that we do to reflect this big demographic shift. Now, while in some areas that may be straightforward, in housing and communities, this means that the time factor comes into play, that we can't change an entire community's housing stock overnight. This puts the pressure on us to understand how we can change our communities today to meet the needs of this aging population, how we can change from the paradigms of the past where we only thought about housing solutions for people of young families, or we only thought of communities as places where young families could be, and didn't think about adding options that could enable people of all ages, all physical abilities, and others to live there. And so this to me is a tipping point at which communities and we as individuals really need to start thinking about it now. And so that demographic change is key. The other piece I wanted to talk about on the slide was just that people want to stay in their homes and communities, and it's nearly 8 out of 10 in our new survey that we just released last month. 8 to 10 people, 50 and older, want to stay in their homes and communities while they age. And so we've got that mismatch that we've been building homes and communities for younger families, younger adults for centuries, really. People want to stay in their homes and communities, and that leaves a gap. And so that's the tremendous opportunity on that third bullet there that presents for us today, the idea that we can think differently and create more solutions so that we can actually do a better job of meeting people's needs and their desire to stay in their communities where they are. So let's go on to this next one here about the more immediate term thing that we're all facing, and that's COVID-19 and COVID. And we've been in this state for the last year and a half, and we know that the COVID-19 crisis and pandemic has exacerbated existing challenges that we've been thinking more about how this is impacting different communities, how there's disparities in health and access to different things. People have been facing job loss, and we've been thinking about housing stability and people that are not able to maintain their housing, be they renters or homeowners. We've enacted federal, state, local level programs to make sure that people can stay in their homes. It's obviously greatly impacted vulnerable populations and given us the lesson that short-term solutions aren't sufficient. And on this next slide, it's an earlier one that shows the death rate as of last spring. And the big piece of this is that as of our latest dashboard last month, over 186,000 residents of nursing homes and other long-term care facilities have died due to COVID-19. And so what that's done is it's given us a whole new way of looking at the urgency of this crisis and how it reflects on us as individuals and families. So I've had many families and individuals come to me and others and really say along the same lines, this crisis has had me start to rethink how my housing works for me. Maybe I realize now that I'm spending more time at home, that my home doesn't have the features that I really need, that I could use. Maybe because my mother or relative or friend has died of COVID, I've been thinking about making sure that I don't have to be in a nursing home unless I absolutely have to be. And maybe there's another way to think about solutions. And there's tens of millions of us who are family caregivers who may want to have space for a loved one. So amongst many things, the urgency of this COVID crisis has drawn attention to some of those issues in society, affordability, and the options that we need, but also spoken to many of us in a really personal way about how we might need to rethink our housing options and how our home works for us. And so that is why both the long-term and how that short-term momentum has us thinking about what we can do to help. And so AARP solutions on this next screen, which is just creating livable communities, great neighborhoods for all ages. The idea that that really fundamentally surrounds our livable communities work is the idea that we should have homes and communities that provide options for people of all ages, all incomes, all levels of physical ability. And there's many ways that we try to do that by really, again, providing these options that help people to meet that desire that most people have to stay in their homes and communities as they age, but not have to compromise in ways that limit their quality of life to do so. And so, again, the issue here is how do we create options that allow people to do that? And that then takes us to tools for change. And I like to say that here in the Public Policy Institute, we're in the solutions business. And we talk about a range of solutions that can really help us think about ways to do that. And one major thing that's come up as part of our approach to housing are accessory dwelling units. And I'll just show some on this next slide as I talk a little bit about why those are so important for us. And first, for anyone who's not familiar, accessory dwelling units are sometimes known as accessory apartments, in-law suites, guest houses, or other names. But the idea is that whether inside your housing unit, attached to your housing unit, or detached in your backyard, it's creating additional options within your yard so that within your property, I should say, so that you can have an additional place to live. And what I love about this is that when we're talking to builders and homeowners and others, we've been building homes in a certain way. I've talked about that gap that's there, that perception that people aren't aging. Disability advocates have called it the Peter Pan syndrome, the idea that wherever we are, we think that's how we're going to be for life. But what this does is it opens the whole door to a new option that doesn't require you to move. And so for a homeowner, it enables you to perhaps create a home that has some universal design features that you might need and be able to stay there. For someone that might need to generate income, it might provide a rental option. For someone that might want to take care of their ailing parent, it might provide a space for them that meets their needs. Or it might provide a place for someone to be and perhaps rent out their home or share their home with others in their family. And so just the idea that we can have more options, that we can create more options within the communities where people are is such a crucial piece of the livable communities approach. And that's because we like our communities for a reason. We may like them because they're close to family or our favorite church or park or place to be. It may be near the kinds of things that we want in a community. It may be healthy. And for many of us, we've built up our memories there. So there's value in community to many of us. And so that means that many of us want to stay there if we can. And so let's figure out ways to help that happen. And that option, providing more options, is just crucial to older adults. And we've seen some more momentum over the years. I mentioned our model act, our first model act was in the year 2000. And in that time, we've seen a lot of traction across the country in accessory dwelling units. And a large part of it, honestly, have been communities that are looking at their housing stock and seeing shortcomings, whether it's the affordability crisis in a state like California or and other places that have really looked at accessory dwelling units as a way to provide just different options of different sizes of housing into them. But for us, it's not just that, not an affordability issue alone. It's also, again, about creating spaces that can better meet our needs and really overcoming some of those inefficiencies, some of those gaps that we've had in our housing over the years. And so I'm excited to kick off our conversation today to talk about ways that we can help expand this option, help bring it to more communities, and really help individuals and homeowners to take advantage of the opportunities that accessory dwelling units can provide. It really is a tool to help you provide more options and stay where you are. And finally, on our last slide here at AARP, we like to think of ourselves as everyday innovators in aging. And I like to think about this all the time as this guiding our work. And I think of you as everyday innovators as well. The idea, especially with ADUs, is one that everyone in a community could ideally play a part in, whether it's supporting changes in regulations to make them easier to build, whether it's building one yourself, whether it's taking advantages of the options that ADUs provide. It's really an innovation that requires all of us to really chip in on, and a way that we can really move forward in creating the housing options that can really move us forward into this new time where we know that we've got a wide diversity of ages, of incomes, of races, of people in our community, and so diverse in so many ways. But we need to bring some diversity to our housing stock as well. One last thing I mentioned, I meant to mention earlier, is that our livability index shows that over 80% of the neighborhoods in the country only have single family homes. And really, I've left with so many people, I've left talking to so many people who have bought a single family home on a cul-de-sac that met their needs at some point, but no longer does. And I'm thinking of individuals who've said their dream home had become a nightmare because maybe it had too many steps or had other barriers that prevented them from enjoying their home, or that they wanted to find a different option but couldn't in their existing neighborhoods. And I don't have time to get into too many of those stories, but the idea that we can help provide more options, we can help build more options, and we collectively can take advantage of those options is really what's crucial to think about. And so in that, I challenge all of you to be everyday innovators in aging and to think about accessory dwelling units as one solution that we could have to move us forward and to help provide those options. And I look forward to our conversation today. So I'll turn it back to Pax and look forward to our presenters.
Thank you so much, Rodney. I really appreciate you setting the stage for us today. And we're now going to kick it over to Shelia Howard-Martinez. Shelia, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Pax. And also I want to thank AARP North Carolina for inviting me to be a part of this event. I'm going to pull up my slides. So today, well, first of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Shelia Howard-Martinez, and I live here in Durham, North Carolina. And part of my role as being a community member here in Durham, North Carolina was to co-facilitate the Durham Master Aging Plan. And so today, what I would like to share with you is, first of all, just an overview of the Durham Master Aging Plan, including some focus on housing and also accessory dwelling units in the Master Aging Plan. I also would like to share some concerns that we learned about during this process from older adults around housing here in Durham. And I also want to leave you with some considerations concerning ADUs as an option for increasing access to safe and affordable housing for older adults. So similar to what Rodney said, here in Durham, we also are going to be seeing a significant increase of older adults over the next 20 years or so. As you can see from this chart, the 60+ age range is expected to grow by 64%, and it's going to be much larger than the other age groups here in Durham. And so as part of that, we decided to get together as a community and develop a master aging plan with this focus on making Durham a more livable and age-friendly community. And when we say livable and age-friendly, we mean a great place to grow up and grow old. We know that when you make communities more livable and more age-friendly for older adults, you also make the communities more livable and age-friendly for children, youth, people who with disabilities of all ages, and families. So here are some of the goals of livability. These are from AARP. Feel safe in your community, participate in community activities, be treated with respect, have access to safe, appropriate, and affordable housing and transportation, have access to recreational opportunities and health services, know what services and activities are available, be active, vital contributors to the economic and social life of the community, and receiving appropriate support. This is a list of the Master Aging Plan Steering Committee members. It was a very diverse group of folks who are all very active here in Durham, working on improving quality of life for everyone, but particularly focused on older adults. Also, I want to say that the Durham Partnership for Seniors also serves as the convener for this Master Aging Plan process. So basically, we looked at the different domains of livability. There's 9 outdoor spaces and buildings, transportation, housing, social participation, respect and social inclusion, civic participation and employment, community support and health services, communication and information, and elder abuse, neglect, and fraud. And for our process, we combined several of the domains just because we wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to get through the process efficiently. And also we wanted to make sure that folks had opportunity to participate in different working groups. So on the right side of the screen, those are the livability working groups that developed each part of the plan for their specific domains. So our process, we began January 2019. That is when an application went to AARP and the World Health Organization asking for Durham to be a member of the Age-Friendly Network. The application was signed by our mayor at that time and also the chair of Durham County Board of County Commissioners. And also they included a letter of support. The steering committee got together, they developed mission, vision, values, and also some guidance around just how the process should be conducted. Back in March of 2019, we had a kickoff event where older adults and steering committee members met together. The whole concept of the Master Aging Plan was introduced to the community. There was also a racial equity training, and also there was feedback provided by older adults around the different domains. And then in April, this is when I joined the process, the livability working groups, we began. We started looking at things like the domain definitions, the goal statements. We also had a mid-year check-in during that summer, and we invited everyone to come to participate, to learn about the plan, and also to learn feedback, to gather feedback from folks. Beginning from August until about December of that year, 2019, the livability working groups continued to develop the different pieces of the plan. And the steering committee also checked in very often to look at the plan's alignment and also to learn about the Master Aging Plan implementation. In March 2020, we had the Durham Master Aging Plan virtual celebration because this is the time when, COVID began here. And so we had a virtual celebration. We engaged key stakeholders like the Durham County Commissioners. Implementation was expected to begin around March 2020 or around April, I should say. We have not been able to begin implementation of our Master Aging Plan. We do plan to pick that up next year. However, this group that has been a part of this Master Aging Plan process has continued to meet and has also implemented a couple of projects to, first of all, support Durham during the COVID-19 pandemic, and also to develop a nonprofit, independent nonprofit called Aging Well Durham that will be one of the main places where this Master Aging Plan will be implemented. So our design process, we wanted to make sure that as we were developing different pieces that there was always alignment between the different parts of the plan. And we also wanted to make sure we were clear about our language. We also wanted to, as we were going through the process, make sure that we had the most relevant information about emerging initiatives, both at the state and local level, that were relevant to the Master Aging Plan. And we also had an open door policy as far as ongoing stakeholder engagement. Everyone was always invited to attend and participate in all of the living working group meetings. We also had a set of cross-cutting issues because we wanted to make sure that our plan really reflected the needs of older adults and their communities and families. And so here's the cross-cutting issues that we selected, and these, you should see them across all pieces of our plan and also within our implementation. So thinking about socioeconomic status, racial equity, LGBTQI+, dementia, communication information, intergenerational opportunities, social isolation, safety, emergency preparedness, and accessibility. A key part of the steering committee especially was thinking about, okay, making sure that these issues show up in our plans, in our definitions, in our strategies, and our goal statements, but also the different community members that we were engaging. So now I'm gonna get down to talking about the housing domain and what we did here in Durham. So for us, the first thing we did was look at AARP's definition of housing. And what do you mean when you say housing for an age-friendly community? So here's AARP's definition. Most people want to remain in their own home and community as they age. Doing so is possible if housing is designed or modified for aging in place, and a community has affordable housing options for varying life stages. So we looked at that definition, and we also looked back at the comments that we received from older adults at the kickoff meeting about housing in Durham. What were their concerns? And there were basically 2 or 3 big themes that came out of those concerns. One was affordability. So, we had older adults say, what is called affordable here in Durham is not always affordable to me. I don't see anything in Durham that would qualify as affordable. And also where I'm living, my rent is increasing. Gentrification and displacement of long-term Durham residents was another major theme. The fact that people say, if I wanted to buy my house today, I really couldn't afford it to do so in Durham. And also thinking about their children, will they be able to live in the city that they grew up in? And also Durham is changing. Durham is a very desirable place for people to live, and people who are moving here have higher incomes. So we looked at all of that and we said, actually going back to the older adults, we asked them also at the kickoff meeting, what would they change about housing in Durham? And I apologize, my voice is so froggy because I have a cold, but the older adults at that kickoff meeting says, if what they would need or what they would want to see to change about housing in Durham, they would like to see increased equity, affordable housing, income and living wage, and also Social Security benefits. So at our first meeting of the housing working group, we looked at all of this, and this was a definition that we came up with as far as what does housing mean in an age-friendly Durham. So in an age-friendly Durham, all people have many housing options from which to choose. This includes housing that is affordable, safe, community-oriented, environmentally friendly, inclusive, accessible, and designed or able to be modified for aging. From there, we looked at, okay, we have our definition. So what should be our housing goals for Durham? And here are the 4 goals that we came up with. One was around developing and enforcing housing laws that prevent discrimination against people based on their age, race, gender identity, social economic class, sexual orientation. Goal 2 is the one that we're going to focus on here today, providing innovative housing options that are available for all ages and income levels. Goal 3, improve collaboration between county residents, private and public entities. And goal 4, improve how information about housing is shared with community members. So going back to goal 2, the one that is around providing innovative housing options, we also came up with a set of strategies and also indicators around that goal. So the first strategy is around implementing innovative programs that have been effective in reducing barriers to housing for older adults. Strategy 2 is increasing access to all types of financing options for families struggling to remain in their homes. And strategy 3 was streamlined process for home repair and improvement services. And as part of strategy 1, the number of accessory dwelling units and duplexes is an indicator. So we do want to know how many, first of all, accessory dwelling units are there currently in Durham, and how can we provide support and advocacy to increase that number of ADUs so that more people can have more housing options. I wanted to just leave though with just a few questions, and these are some questions that I sent to Pat, and I think it's the reason why I was invited today. But just thinking back on the master aging plan process and the conversations that we continue to have here in Durham about housing, the concerns that older adults have about housing in Durham, how can we make sure that ADUs are a viable housing option for older adults who may already be struggling with accessing affordable housing? How can we ensure that ADUs are not used as an accelerant for increased displacement of long-term residents? And how can we make sure that ADUs are truly available to everyone who is interested in having one, recognizing that housing is still segregated by race and income in most communities, including here in Durham? So I look forward to learning from the rest of the folks here, the rest of the panelists today, and I look forward to also talking with y'all later on. Thank you so much for having me here today.
Thank you so much, Shelia. We really appreciate you walking us through that. You are a go-to person in Durham, as so many folks know. So thank you for being here. Next, we're going to move on to Scott Whiteman, who is with Durham's planning department. Scott, take it away.
Good morning. As Pac said, my name is Scott Whiteman. I'm the Policy and Urban Design Manager for the Durham City County Planning Department. I'm here to talk a little bit about the rules and regulations that we have for ADUs in the city and county of Durham. So Durham has allowed accessory dwelling units by right in all residential districts since we adopted a new unified development ordinance in 2006. Those are both detached and attached accessory dwelling units. We are definitely on one of the early adopters of that in North Carolina, and we're particularly on the cutting edge for communities in the Triangle. As we were kind of assessing the effectiveness of our rules, in 2018, we determined that there had only been 72 permitted since 2006. And in a community that has 1,000 to 2,000 residential permits issued every year, that is not very much. What we learned is that some of the existing regulations made it limited the viability of ADUs, particularly on properties that had small primary structures. We also heard that the process could be difficult and expensive to navigate for citizen builders, the small folks who aren't associated with big development firms. And in addition to all the things you already heard from Shelia and Rodney, we had a lot of support throughout our community, and particularly from the city and county elected officials, for making ADUs more viable option. For reasons because it's a grassroots approach to increasing the supply of housing. It can give property owners, particularly those in neighborhoods where the value of property is rising rapidly, a source of rental income for their existing property. And we heard a lot of folks, just particularly regular homeowners, who had interest in building ADUs and just wanted to learn more and find easier ways to do it. So in 2018, we began an initiative we called Expanding Housing Choices to just generally increase the supply of housing and options of housing units, particularly in the high opportunity neighborhoods in central Durham near downtown. And this included some comprehensive changes to our accessory dwelling unit regulations. So we continued to allow one ADU per lot with every residential unit in the city and county. We also increased the situations where ADUs were allowed, including allowing one ADU with a duplex, allowing up to 3 ADUs on certain civic uses. This was particularly targeted towards churches and other places of worship, many of which have a lot of land and are looking for mission-based housing opportunities. And we allowed them on non-conforming lots that were smaller than what the current zoning allowed, which we found we had quite a few of throughout Durham. An important change is that previously ADUs were limited to be 30% of the floor area of the primary structure. That turned out to be particularly limiting. We have a lot of smaller structures in central Durham. So for example, if you had a 900 square foot house, that would limit the ADU to only being 300 square feet, which is really not a viable size for a residential unit. So it was changed to be 800 square foot maximum, regardless of the size of the primary structure. The only caveat being that it could not be bigger than the primary structure. We also changed the maximum height, which Before, the language said it must be subordinate to the primary structure. So that typically meant that if you had a one-story primary structure, you can only have a one-story ADU. So that was changed to be 25 feet for all accessory structures, including ADUs. One of the things we heard that was a particularly limiting factor is that banks were much more willing to provide financing for an ADU if it had a garage on the bottom, because banks apparently view garages as just part of the house, where they see ADUs as a riskier investment property. However, if the ADU is included as part of the garage, it was just looked at as extra space. And so what we found is that since these rules went into place, we haven't tracked all of the ADU permits that we've issued since these rules went into place, but just the ADUs that have been permitted based on the change of the rules. So things that would not have been allowed before, we've had 50 in the last 2 years, which is a significant increase than what we had. So although it's not the focus of today's discussion, one of the other things we included in the Expanding Housing Choices Initiative was an option for very small lots or flag lots with very small poles, the part of the lot that accesses the street. One of the things that we heard from folks in the community was that they might be interested in using their backyard to provide some additional housing, but they didn't necessarily want to become a landlord. And we particularly heard that financing for ADUs as a rental was particularly difficult. However, it was a whole lot easier to finance a very similar structure as a fee simple property on its own lot. So in certain districts, not countywide, we allowed a lot as small as 2,000 square feet, as long as the structure that was built was no greater than 1,200 square feet and didn't exceed the 800 square foot maximum footprint. We'd also allowed an ADU with that, so we could effectively get 2 units on that very small lot. And then there's a very similar provision which allowed a narrower flagpole lot option for flag lot properties. So those changes were adopted by both the City Council and the County Commission back in late 2019 and have now been effective for a little over 2 years. But so the resulting regulations for accessory dwelling units and these are all as long as you meet all of the standards, these are all by right approvals with just the issuance of a permit. No public hearings or anything like that are required. So the maximum size is 800 square feet, regardless of the primary structure size. The ADU can be in the rear yard or in some cases in part of the side yard. The maximum height is 25 feet. There is no parking required for the ADU. The setbacks from the side and rear property lines are 3 to 5 feet, depending on which zoning district you're in. And one thing that was not part of the Expanding Housing Choices was something the city administration, as well as we got some legislative assistance from one of our state senators, was to allow detached ADUs to be on the same sewer connection as the primary structure, which required some changes to state rules, which according to developed communities save up to $10,000 to $15,000 per unit. So that concludes the presentation on our regulations, and we'll happy to answer any questions on these later at the end of the program.
Great, thank you so much, Scott. We really appreciate that. We certainly have gotten a few questions in our Q&A, so I look forward to being able to have our panelists answer those at the end of our program. Please continue to ask your questions so that we can work to get those answered for you. And now I'm going to kick it over to Richard Duncan for the next part of our program. Richard?
Oops. Thank you, Pax, and hello, everybody. Great to be part of this discussion today. I'm speaking to you from my current office location in Asheville, North Carolina. We were located in the Raleigh-Durham area for many years. And by way of beginning here, I'll say that, like with the holiday entertaining that we may all be doing, one of the rules for cooking is never cook something new for your guests, because anything could happen. You always want to test it out on your family first, right? Same thing is true for presentations. Never try something new when you're doing a major presentation. And I'm doing that. So I'm having problems sharing my screen, even though it worked perfectly yesterday. And so I'm going to be grappling with that as I try and get this stuff up for you to see. And we'll try and vamp. So what I'll be talking about in my presentation is, here we go, is design features that will work well for aging in place. And let's see if I can get this going. Nope, that's not working. Here we go. So here's the meal I'm cooking today for this. We're really happy to be part of this conversation. I've learned a lot already. Okay, so what we're going to be talking about in this section is when we're talking about accessory dwelling units, how do we actually design them in a way that's age friendly? How do we make it so that people can age safely and as independently as possible? So we'll be talking about design features and some products as we go through this short show. But first, I'm going to start out with telling you what a non-age friendly ADU might be like. And that includes any accessory dwelling that requires that you climb stairs to get to it. So an ADU located over a garage, not such a good idea. ADU located in a basement accessible only by stairs, not such a good idea. A walkout basement's fine, but not a basement that can only be reached by stairs. And also an ADU that's in addition perhaps to a house on an off-grade level that again is only accessible by stairs. Stairs are dangerous places for all of us. Everyone has tripped and fallen at some point in their life on sets of stairs. They become increasingly unsafe places for older adults to be having to use every day, all the time. Is the only way to come and go from their dwelling. So avoid those kinds of locations. And we'll show you kind of what we're talking about when we talk about more age-friendly entrance features and others in the next few slides. The one thing to mention is that also we have this nice little image of an ADU here, taken from, I think, one of the many books and publications AARP has put out on accessory dwellings. It's lovely. There's actually two problems with this entrance, one of which you'll be able to guess, that I'll share with you in a couple of minutes. So universal design. Whoops, let's go back. Universal design. Really, universal design we see as a vehicle to result in an age-friendly dwelling. We know that ADUs are generally between 350 and 800 square feet. You heard Scott mention the limits in Durham. It's a common limit elsewhere. Much below 350 square feet, you get to be in very difficult circumstances. How do you make an actual dwelling that works well and is actually age-friendly for older folks? And to be clear, this is distinct from tiny homes. Tiny homes are not the same thing as accessory dwelling units. Tiny homes are, in fact, largely much smaller, often on wheels. I've never seen one that's been a successful aging in place dwelling, at least for very long in most people's lives. Just a few bullet points. We like step-free entrances. We like covered porches, generally wider doors you might be finding in most other homes, although not many doorways in accessory dwelling units because they're so small, as you'll see. Usable bathrooms. This is really the room where the most changes take place between a standard home, a typical home, and an age-friendly home. And of course, a kitchen that can be more usable perhaps than standard ones. You got to deal with laundry. We'll talk about that. And I found that with lots of small dwellings, having access to outdoor living space of some kind or other is really helpful. So keep that in mind as you're doing your planning, and we hope you all do. So first thing to say is this is not an accessory dwelling. This is just a picture that I use because it shows some nice outside features that can be absolutely replicated in accessory dwellings. So we have a general sloping pathway that comes from the driveway up to the side of the house, around the Nandina bushes, onto a porch that's level with the first floor. There's no step in from the porch into the first floor. That's crucial in having a step-free entry. And it has a porch roof, not just a porch roof, but it has a big porch. So it actually is providing some of that outdoor living space I was talking about there. But we're really looking at porch roofs and roofs over entryways as serving two functions. One is to provide weather protection for those of us who are coming and going, and it may be taking a little longer, so that we're not rained on or snowed on, perhaps, as a result of that protection we've got on the porch. And also, it really helps, we think, with potential water infiltration around the door with these level entrances. So it's really two functions we think matter a lot in providing porch roofs over every entryway that's step-free. One thing we didn't provide here was rails on these stairs. Really, any staircase at all that's expected to be used by older adults needs to have handrails to assist, not just older folks like me, but even younger folks as well. So keep that in mind if you're designing stairs that are part of some route of travel. It's not that we don't like stairs, just don't have it be the only way into the house. And finally, we provided a pathway that's firm, stable, and even. So it's not gravel, it's not loose flagstones, it's not even brick on a typical sand bed. It's got to be some material that actually can be firm, stable, and even over its lifespan. And you can achieve these step-free entrances in a lot of different ways. This happens to be, a house we're showing that has a block foundation, maybe a crawl space of some kind. And we're using retaining walls and grading to provide a gentle sloping pathway up to the porch that, of course, has the roof over it. Or you could try slab on grade or raised slab foundations as well. That means that for everyone coming and going, you don't have to use stairs. And you can see this smiling mover. He's smiling because he doesn't have to drag that washer up 3 flights of stairs. It's the same with everybody. All right, here's our house again. Nice little house, lovely in someone's backyard. It has two problems. One, you've already guessed, no porch roof, right? So someone standing there is going to be fumbling with their keys and getting rained on. They don't need to be. The other is maybe a little bit less obvious. It's got a step-free entrance, but the entrance in the slope portion, the pathway comes right up to the doorway, which means that I'm standing there, perhaps, maybe my balance isn't what it used to be, and I'm, again, fumbling with my keys and packages. Meanwhile, because I'm standing on this inclined surface, I'm going to be tipping over backwards, a thing to be avoided. Always provide a level platform at the entryway. So moving on, you saw this slide in one of Rodney's slides. This is from one of their accessory dwelling design books. Really useful. We have links to these and others I'll talk about later on. This is a very small one. Does not have a step-free entrance coming into it. Could be easily added either with a ramp, which we're not too fond of, or with some graded entry. It's only 350 square feet. Basically a studio apartment, which is fine. They might have used, perhaps you could think about a Murphy bed, even in these kinds of situations, or one of these more advanced kind of sliding wall systems that can make more flexible use of space. As I said, the bathroom is really the room where we see the most changes from typical small cramped bathrooms to a bathroom that really is more accommodating for older adults. So we've got a curbless shower in here, which is great. We do have two things we're not that fond of. The architect showed these standard kind of public restroom locations for grab bars. We don't think they work very well for most older adults. There's better ways you can provide support around the toilets than those kinds of grab bars that are also very kind of stereotypical and stigmatizing. But something else we like is an outswinging door. We love outswinging doors on bathrooms because they take that door swing out of the bathroom where space is generally more cramped. And in this case, we could have actually made that bathroom a little bit narrower because that door swings out, because you might have been able to use the curbless shower as part of the maneuvering room inside the bathroom. We could have saved some space that way. Okay, here's another slightly larger dwelling. This one has a ramp, which is fine. Again, it looks like in this particular rendering, they might have been able to do something that was graded. And they do have a rail on that, which is good. And some outdoor living space in both of these examples I've showed. So they got some space that someone could expand their living during weather that's nice enough to do that. 525 square feet, kind of a one bedroom, modified kind of a studio effect here with some closets and a similar bathroom with a different kind of a shower arrangement, door swinging. And in this case, they could have provided perhaps a pocket door, which would have made a difference. And again, their deck outside provides some outdoor living space. And here's another one that we did in a book that we produced on how you design some of these things that shows about the same square footage, slightly differently configured bathroom. And this time we decided to showcase how you might use pocket doors to make things work out. And one more thing. Oops, sorry. What we might have done also, we don't have a lot of storage in many of these things. We have a couple of places for storage. We might have made the kitchen smaller to provide a place for a washer and dryer or provide a place for additional storage within the house. Kitchen tend to be one of these things that might be flexible in how you design it. This shows the kitchen from that particular home with a kind of a space-saving, easier for bending over and reaching drawer style dishwasher, base cabinets that feature primarily drawers that pull out, making it easy to reach again. A lowered work surface, which we all like. You don't have to have all lower counters. And reminder that an age-friendly home is not necessarily one that's designed for someone who uses a wheelchair. It's designed for folks who generally are ambulatory, but who might have issues with balance or reaching or bending. And finally, we don't show wall cabinets. We're not big fans of wall cabinets for older adults if you can avoid them. Obviously, you could have easily added them in here, and you're welcome to do that if you want to think about this kind of design. What we like better, let's see if I've got this coming up. I'll show you what we like better in a couple of minutes in a slide that's coming up in a little bit. So here's a slightly larger dwelling, 800 square feet, also outdoor living space, stairs and ramps, which is okay. And it shows two tiny bedrooms with a ramp coming up here and the outdoor living space, small but adequate kitchen, room for a washer and dryer. And this time they've added a tub in there. Well, we're not that fond of tubs for older adults. We know that a lot of folks really adamantly prefer tub bathing, and that's fine. We think that curbless showers, authentically curbless showers, really make the bigger difference. And here's our curbless shower. We call it that for a reason. It's not a roll-in shower because it really isn't limited to people who might be using a wheeled vehicle to get in there, like a shower chair. Any curb at all can be a tripping hazard. I've got a tripping hazard shower in my bathroom, and I'm going to be changing that as soon as I can. We really mean a curbless shower, and really a shower with a very minimal or zero threshold at all, so that no tripping can happen, and it won't be preventing someone who's rolling something wheeled in there from using it also. So really a very low threshold indeed. We prefer minimum 3-foot depth on these. So we encourage people to avoid kind of the standard 30 by 60 curbless shower, which is sometimes thought of as being kind of an equivalent, but it really isn't. It's really too narrow for effective use. I'll get back to, here's our showcasing an alternative storage for kitchens. This is a very modest, not very expensive pantry style storage system. There's lots of different versions of this. The main features are that it pulls the storage out to you. Again, you're not reaching. So you have both visual and physical access to the stored items. Lots of different varieties of this. This is obviously something that's a more costly kind of custom cabinetry situation, but same basic idea for people of all ages and all ability levels. If you've got a floor standing range or any kind of range at all, having it be one with front controls makes a big difference. If you're not having to reach over hot burners to get at the controls, and having the controls on the front means that I can see them better. They're closer to my eyes. Better still is a front control option that has some a tilted control panel. So it's actually pointing up at me, not horizontally out at the room. Induction stovetops these days are kind of becoming better known as being safer because the surface doesn't get hot. It's much harder to burn yourself in an induction stovetop range. And also I've been told that lots of older folks are opting for these 2 oven ranges, primarily using the top oven and restricting the bottom oven for special occasions. So again, bending and reaching is kind of saved as a result of that. Here's my mom demonstrating what is the gold standard for laundry setups. There's the side-by-side front opening, front control washers and dryers. They're adjustable in height, which we love because it's very flexible. We can have storage below and a work surface above. Not easy to accommodate in an accessory dwelling, frankly. You may find some you can fit one in there, but much more commonly, you'll be opting for something like this probably, which is an over-under washer dryer. And with controls, importantly, in the middle, not at the top. I've seen units that have top controls, and it makes it very difficult for a lot of folks to use. And this might be an interim, maybe not the thing you can keep for the whole time you're in the dwelling. You may have to think about longer term, a single compact unit that takes up about the same footprint, where you put dirty clothes in and you take clean, dry clothes out. Obviously, the capacity is not what it might be with the other units, but there may be times during our lives when we need to kind of think about those kinds of options. So there we are, very quick survey of those kind of sizes and what you get with different sizes. You know, why step-free matters, why covered porches matter. We've discussed a couple of different doorway configurations and bathroom features, as well as some features in the kitchen that might make them more age-friendly, what you might be thinking about for laundry, as well as the importance for outdoor living space. And really what we're talking about is helping people plan for life's inevitable changes, as much as we might not like to think about that. We're really trying to help folks live safely and as independently as they prefer, without having the home become this major problem area in our lives that restricts our activities and our life choices and our lifestyle. Right, so that's the end of this portion of the presentation. Packs, whoops, that's for later. Let me get this stopped and go back, kick it back to you, and you can, while you're working on the slideshow, I can do a little intro.
Yeah, we're ready to queue up the video.
Okay,
So
well, let me just say a couple of things. You're about to see a slideshow that we produced with 3 households from the Durham area. We're very grateful to have them let us come into their homes and interview them and showcase their houses and their stories and their nettos. We think they have some compelling stories to tell. You'll notice as you look at these that there's some common themes throughout them. You can pick up on those, I'm sure. There's also some differences between them, starting with the fact that one is a newly built detached dwelling, another is a renovated detached dwelling, and the third is an addition onto an existing primary residence. So we like that kind of the kind of differences that pulls up. Each of these also has, I think, significant age-friendly features, which is hard to find in a lot of accessory dwellings. We've worked hard to find these homes to showcase to you. And our goal really is to show these to you in hopes that it will motivate you, if you're not sufficiently motivated already, to consider going in this direction and then pursuing this further. You have resources available from Scott's office and from Shalisa's office, and a lot of other work that's been is happening in Durham and will continue to happen in Durham into the new year and the years after that, that will make it more available to more households at any price point and up and down the income scale. And so we hope that these kind of inspire folks to think about, pursue this, maybe they hadn't before. So let's go.
To be part of our children's and grandchildren's lives. I wanted that for both me and Charles.
I love the idea to have them closer because we can run into each other, we cook for each other.
My parents and my wife and kids, we all thought that it would be a good idea to live close together.
My job is in a continuing care retirement community, so I see what that's like. and how many people are isolated in a situation like that. And I realized I don't want that for myself and my family. Let's do this now rather than wait until we need it. I know that if we just stayed by ourselves, we would be this old couple that were just kind of toddling around and, yep, saying hello to the neighbors and never having any kind of live interaction. So with the advent of grandchildren, the idea became more pressing that we find a way to live close to them and be part of their lives. We've lived in this house since the middle of February, so now that's 9 months. Yeah, took a while to settle in. It was a grief process for both of us, involved in the downsizing. It's a lot of work. And the leaving of the house where we had spent many good years. Yeah. So I'm glad the children didn't move in immediately and that they did some renovation because that made the house their house the way they want it. But that was also difficult for us.
It's all the love, and I like to be together. I like family. I like to be closer to them. And when they get older, it would be easier and cheaper if they have their own place. That would be really respectful for them because they deserve that. As a kid, we respect that. We honor that for them. They have to live with dignity in the place that they love. And if we can provide some care that comes from family,
It's just an easy flow for sharing food and time together.
For the past couple of years when we cook, lots of times we'll cook enough for, 15 servings. So we have enough to eat leftovers and all that good stuff. And so it makes it really easy to just invite my parents over, and they will oftentimes do the same thing.
The town of Hillsborough was having public hearings on the idea of amending the ordinance to allow accessory dwelling units. So the idea of building a unit came about when Hillsborough made it possible, actually. So I looked at AARP's Home Fit Guide and studied that, made notes on it. The pocket doors are space savers. So that was the main reason for them. There's a grab bar by the toilet, and the toilet is a little higher than the average toilet. 2 grab bars in the shower. We talked about whether to put a bench in the shower and decided at this point we'd rather have the space. And at a later time, we can have a shower chair. It's recommended by people who think of universal design and AARP's House Fit program, Home Fit program. The carport is excellent. This is beautiful. He loves it and I love it too. Just to have easy access from the vehicle to the house where you're carrying things and getting in and out during the weather.
the generational experience and traditions and love that they can send that to their grandkids is something very important to me as a mother, and of course to my husband as well.
I mean, we couldn't do this 10 years from now. Not only that, the children would be out of the house. I mean, it's both their ages, and this is the time to be part of their lives. And also, we're able now. We should make the adjustment now. When Eldon, who's 2, almost 3, walks over and knocks on the door and says, "Hi, Grandpa," what are you going to do?
I feel like the timing was right for me. 5 years ago might have been a little too soon. I had just retired from work 5 years ago. And then after that got to be a little bit older, I was like, maybe it's time to go ahead and build an ADU or move into something smaller. So, and Raymond at that point was like, "No, you cannot move. We're going to do the ADU." I said, "Great." The biggest advantage to me moving here has probably been knowing that my health could fail down the road with my disability, with the ataxia, and that having the support from people that live in the front house. And that's one of the things we considered here as well, is Raymond and Joanne have, the extra bedrooms upstairs, that if down the road we all need a caregiver, we could offer somebody room and board in exchange for, and a salary in exchange for taking care of the 3 of us. if we needed assistance. We already have a ramp that was installed in probably early 90s, and that was for my sister and her friend Eleanor, so that they could get in and out of the house easily down the road when needed. So we wanted to make sure that when we did get into the house and needed to go out to the porch or anything like that, we had these 0-step curbs going out so that the walker would roll across them really easily. When we were designing the house, I had lived since 1991 with a covered front porch, and I knew that I was going to miss that. So I asked Gail, can I have that? She said, of course we can give you a covered front porch. And then at that time, they decided to add the little cover over the steps going out into the driveway, so that in the future, if we needed to add a ramp, we would add the ramp right where the stairs are, and the ramp would come up to a covered area so that you would be covered and out of the rain pretty quickly. So when we were talking about the design with the architect, Kim, I asked her to make sure that we had under the counter lighting in the kitchen. I asked for pull-out drawers and everywhere I could get them in the kitchen, and that has been a really great thing as far as, you know, being easier to get in and out, my pots and pans, everything. Other things, so in the bathroom, we asked for the comfort height toilet seats or toilets so that it's easier to get up and off the toilet as you're older. Yes, all operable windows throughout the house are crank out windows. Boy, that has been really huge too. I love how easy it is to open and close the windows now. I think the reason I wanted pocket doors is because it is a small space. I didn't want the door to open out into the room or into the closet and take up space. Probably the thing I like the most about living here is the screen porch that has been amazing during COVID for gathering and, you know, social distance gathering to eat dinners with neighbors and friends. And then I have a little ramp that goes off the porch out into the storage building and the lot, where I can just go out and take care of my dog when I need to, and it's step-free, you know, no steps, so it's wonderful. I think things have exceeded my every expectation. It's just been fabulous. It's been wonderful to be so close to my sister and her partner, and it's wonderful. I couldn't ask for anything else.
So I bought this house in 2005, actually moved in 2004 as a renter and was able to buy it from the owner about a year later. We had started talking pretty quickly after that about having Susie come down and live in the back house. Her situation in New York was not very convenient. She lived in the second floor of an apartment with stairs. Her electric scooter had to live in a nearby store, and they had to pay the storekeeper to store the scooter and keep it charged up there when they wanted to go out. So it was just not a very convenient way of life, and being closer seemed like a good idea.
I've always been self-supporting. I was able to be quite independent in Durham when I first moved down here with the scooter. But then with the stroke, it got harder.
We really took a good look at the place and realized how much work it was going to need in order to really make it accessible and for her to be able to live back there independently.
Paul and Julie had already put in the wooden ramp outside, but to get from Paul and Julie's house back to the small house behind was basically a muddy path.
So we brought in a contractor to do some repairs and some accessibility modifications, and also build we had kind of a paver's path down to the back, which had been like partially covered in mud and also was not going to work for a scooter. So we replaced that with just like a concrete path.
The bathroom, the entrance door to the bathroom, I guess, is wide. And the toilet has a elevated seat. The stove and kitchen area was down low. So in a way, it's a process of a continual adaptation of the house. You know, this is a house that had previously undergone a lot of changes, and but for me, it's been continually adapted.
So I think accessory dwellings are a great option for Durham for a couple of reasons. We have a lot of open land in our urban areas where there are houses on big lots, essentially, where there's a lot of backyard space. We also know that older adults are our fastest growing population group. We expect to have that population to continue to grow in the city, to expect to have even more older adults living in Durham over the next 10 to 20 years. And so housing and resources for older adults is a big priority for the city and the county. And I think ADUs are increasingly popular as well. People see them as a great opportunity to either have a family member come and live nearby in their backyard, or to rent them out to other folks for a little bit of extra income. And because they're small, they're going to be a lot more affordable than a lot of the other housing options.
I have two wonderful grandchildren. Yeah, when I first arrived, there was one who was, I guess, 5 or 6 at that time, and then eventually there was a second one who's now 7.
But the ADU is I think a great solution where you have your own space, but you're still close and you can see each other and interact. And the kid, Langston's been going back there on his own since he was 4, so it's nice to be that close and for them to have that freedom to just go back and see grandma whenever they want.
Okay, I hope you all enjoyed those stories. I know that, as Richard said, they were very intentional to find models and examples of ADUs that were designed well, and just were able to showcase those wonderful stories. So thank you. At this time, Richard is going to share some resources for folks. And then as soon as he's finished with that, we are going to move into our Q&A portion.
Okay, thank you, Pax. I hope you enjoyed those stories. They're really compelling and interesting. And I hope I can be more successful sharing now than I was earlier. See, I've made the meal and you're not the guinea pigs any longer. Here we go. So, well, I think one of the fun things we found out in that video was that one of the households actually used AARP's Home Fit Guide as one of their kind of guiding documents to help them figure out what kind of age-friendly features they wanted in the house. So I'm compelled to offer this here. In fact, it is a useful kind of one-stop shop for a lot of folks who are thinking about this, and we think everyone should have it or download it or have a print copy. And you can get it here. We'll actually provide this resource and all the others digitally on our website and probably AARP's website as well. So you'll be able to click and go. You don't have to scrabble and write these things down. But we think the Home Fit Guide and all the other materials associated with that, I think are very useful to start your thinking about how you might plan for some changes, either renovations or new construction. So we commend that to you. Also, Rodney mentioned AARP's Livable Communities Initiative. Here's the link to that. And Durham, we know, is a part of that. The Age Friendly Communities Initiative as well, a link to that to find out about what AARP is doing nationally and in North Carolina regarding not just housing, but all the other domains of livability that matter. And something that's more of kind of a policy piece regarding the economy of aging, with this vastly increasing proportion in numbers of older adults. So what does this mean for our communities locally and nationally? And we have our website. We have a ton of information on there on design in all these categories: multifamily, accessory dwellings, new homes, adapting existing homes. What about issues specific to older adults? And then accessible housing, because of course accessible housing is somewhat different. That's generally regarded as housing that's designed specifically for someone who's the primary homemaker operating from a seated position. And there's a lot we can say about that. So we've got some of these resources we're talking about now on our website as well. I don't have the links here for you, but we'll have them, as I say, digitally. But locally, Haven Design Build is very interested in this whole area. They've got interesting stuff on their website. We'll provide that link to you. The Durham Community Land Trust is also very active in this area and interested in more, as is Haven, in much more deeply affordable models of how people can have accessory dwellings. We'll have links to the Durham Planning Office, Scott's office, and their resources to help guide you through the process of figuring out the permitting and development process. And then our partner Cole Peterson out in Oregon, who's been so helpful this fall with us, his organization Accessory Dwelling Strategies, will have a link to that. He's got tons of information about developing ADUs. And then a link to another organization that deals with this in another model, ADUs as condominiums, not necessarily as rental or owner occupied, but maybe as a condominium model. And then a couple other links, several other links down below that I have here that we'll make available, dealing with two of our primary secondary mortgage market actors, Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, both interested in this. We hope they get much more interested in this to make more of this possible. And then ordinance suggestions from around the country, including Chicago, Des Moines, and Seattle. Each area has been active in this area. So if you're not from here, those may be places to go look. But we have, again, lots of links to other information as well on the rest of our website. So this is us. As I say, we're now in Nashville. Spent 25 years in the Triangle area, which we're happy to be there for and kind of return. Here's us. And then here's some of the stuff that we do. So we'll be making all these presentations available to, I think, everybody afterwards offline in some manner or form. I'm not quite sure which yet. So you can revisit these and not worry about missing stuff that you didn't have a long enough chance to be looking at during the actual presentations themselves today. So with that, Pax, I'll turn it back to you for Q&A.
Yeah, sounds great. So we have many questions, great questions you all have put in our Q&A. I have been trying to lump them together as best as possible so that we can answer some of the questions that were asked more than once. First, if your question does not get answered today, I will be sure that you have contact information so that we can answer those questions for you after the program. So this first question that I have, Richard answered a bit earlier, is an ADU the same as a tiny house? We know the answer to that is no, but the second part of this question is, does it impact regulations in terms of where they are allowed to be built or set up, if it is a tiny house or an ADU? And I don't know
Scott?
exactly. Yeah, go ahead.
That's a good question for Scott.
Nice punt, Richard. Yeah, I think as Richard said, a lot of the what we consider what are called tiny houses tend to be kind of on wheels, really small units on wheels. And most places, including Durham, have a significant different regulations for things that are on wheels. And at the moment, we don't allow, if it's not on a permanent foundation, it can be considered an ADU. I mean, I'm not sure, I know they seem to be the rage at one point. I don't know if they still are. But yeah, that's probably the biggest difference. If someone was able to find a way to build a tiny home on a permanent foundation, that would certainly be permitted.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I've never seen it possible to build a tiny home that's actually age friendly, much less accessible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thanks. This next question I want to answer is coming from Sage of Central North Carolina, and it's something that I've heard just in the last several months of talking to so many different folks about ADUs. And that is, so often we hear complaints in neighborhoods targeted for ADUs that parking would become a nightmare. And, how do we respond to that sort of a complaint, especially when we are in favor of ADUs as a housing option?
I'll say from our perspective, we have not required parking for ADUs for several years that even preceded our Expanding Housing Choices initiative. And we have not seen a huge problem in any particular part of town, even the ones where there's where we tend to get more ADUs than others. I think a lot of that is because tends to be, particularly in the kinds of single family neighborhoods where ADUs get built, there tends to be street spaces or really long driveways. And so even without having the required parking space, there is parking available. Obviously, it could get to the point where you do it. I don't know, nightmare might be overdoing it, but it could get inconvenient. You might have to walk a little bit further from your car to your front door. And that's really up to the community and its elected official to determine. At some point, with the limited land you have available in your community, you're either going to have to prioritize places for people or places with cars.
I want to jump in here too, and I think thanks Scott for going first on this, because his experience matches kind of what we're seeing nationally, and that's that while there are lots of fears about just change in general and things being different in a neighborhood, your experience, the experience that Scott describes is what we've been hearing elsewhere, that when we put extra parking requirements on ADUs, the main thing is that it makes fewer ADUs built. It just limits our ability to do it. When we don't see those limitations, we have in most places are similar to how Scott described them, right? That we're providing options where there are some. And replacing parking spaces that are lost is sometimes a compromise option. If you're building an ADU over a parking space, and sometimes I've seen that happen as well. But really, we start adding extra spaces without taking into account the parking spaces that are available and unused and not used regularly, and the actual use of the spaces. That's the kind of thing that you do in advance that really just limits our ability to use the option. So I would recommend to those community residents to look and see what the experience of others have been before we do something that's really going to take this option out of the hands of homeowners.
Speaking as an older person who hates cars, I can't wait to give mine up. And it's actually less likely that an older household is going to have 2 or 3 cars or more, like a lot of our other households. We may just have one. And maybe at some point, like me, as soon as I can, I will have none. So the impact from older adults occupying ADUs, I think, is even reduced further.
Agreed.
Yeah. Thank you all. So we have quite a few questions in the chat asking more about access to build ADUs and about, financing for ADUs when it is limited, for homeowners, access for an ADU, for if you have a lower credit score, all of these sort of access issues. So is there anything that our audience should be aware of for these sorts of things? Is anything being done to make financing options more available